Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here with Ed LaCour for Brain Porn 5. Talking first off, I think, about the upcoming elections. Ed, did you hear this? You're supposed to wear red if you're going to vote for Trump so that people can note just visually as people are coming out of the polling booths and going in. If there's a lot of red shirts and then they come out and say that it was a landslide for Hillary, we know something was up. Have you heard that?
Yeah, but there's huge paranoia on both sides. I mean, both sides are slowly descending into madness because you've got the left are convinced that Putin is messing with the election, and the right and the Trumpists are convinced that Hillary is going to mess with it because she's Hillary. So yeah, she has the means and the motive and the opportunity to screw with the election. So they've got a point there. But it's interesting how a lot of this is actually more of a referendum on Putin, because if you look at what happened, the left's evolution on their position with Putin, when in the previous election with the Mormon, what was his name?
Mitt Romney.
Yeah, he was raising awareness of the problems with Putin because he was getting very expansionist and saber rattling. And Obama, in a debate, mocked him and said, oh, he thinks it's the Cold War again. But Mitt Romney was correct. And now the left have gone to the other extreme. They're now extraordinarily paranoid. And as I say, even in my country, the left tried to blame Brexit on Putin. You know, it was all a Putin plot. Putin is the bogeyman for the left now. They've gone from completely ignoring him and being the usual kind of naive saps that are exploited by tyrants to, oh my God, we must do everything we can. And so there's a lot of fear that Hillary wants to start World War III because she's been saber rattling to a ridiculous degree. And of course, Putin wants to do the same thing. But the problem is that with Hillary and the rest of them, it isn't strength, it's desperation, it's madness that they project.
Well, almost all of our big wars have been orchestrated with a Democrat in office. So if we have a Republican in office, small, quick wars. But if we have a Democrat in office, big wars. That's just historically the case. So
yeah. Well, I mean, the one exception being the war in Iraq, which just went on and on and on, and which the left have turned into political fuel ever since, because they can just point to that and say the right love war and they're warmongers and stuff. And that was historically wasn't.
Bush's original 1991 invasion was very quick and very well.
Oh yeah.
And then again, the second one went very well at first. It's just that they stopped and dragged it out and withdrew and had talks and stuff. But it would have gone well, minus all the UN stuff and nonsense.
Yeah, if they'd approached it like they did with Japan and Germany after the Second World War. Yeah, the philosophy was completely wrong. They thought that they could go in there with a light touch. The ridiculous thing is that Japan and Germany were civilized countries that went horribly wrong. I mean, Japan industrialized and westernized incredibly fast, considering it was isolated for centuries. And Germany, of course, was the hub of a lot of civilized work. So despite the fact that they were already civilized countries, it still took decades of occupation to rehabilitate them. Well, less than a decade, really, but it continued on for decades. Whereas the Middle East is, in many senses, centuries behind the West. So the very idea that you could have a light touch with them is ridiculous.
Well, but in the 40s and the 50s and 60s, Baghdad looked a lot, it looks like parts of Cincinnati, Ohio right now.
Yes.
You know, Baghdad had street lights and cars and it was civilized. And the same in Iran, the same was true in Tehran. They had women walking around, they had glass front window shops in the 70s. So times moved backwards there. They
Morocco,
were
Libya,
50 years ago. They were more civilized than they are today. So I get the point about Japan and Germany. They were very intelligent, educated. There was skilled labor. They were trained. Their societies were well educated when they got into those big wars. So rebuilding was not that big of a problem. But the same thing's generally true in Iraq. Everybody there's literate and trained and knows about electricity and how to drive cars. It's a modern society. We should have been, there should be dozens of skyscrapers in Iraq. We should have made it a free trade zone like Hong Kong and Tokyo and Berlin. We should have, turned it into a free trade zone.
Yes,
And-
but the problem is that we may have gained something economically from that, but the marketplace of ideas is still toxic in the Middle East, because you've still got a lot of anti-Semitism, a lot of fundamentalism, a lot of Sharia law belief, huge amount. And it doesn't take much. See, the Ayatollahs and the Imams and the radicals, they can take over very quickly. I mean, you've seen it happen over and over again in Muslim country after Muslim country. Fundamentalists take over like that. It doesn't take much because their position is more coherent than that of the moderates.
Yeah,
And this is what I'm looking into with Orthodox Catholics. I've been looking at all these lectures, and their whole thing is that we need to be strict and coherent to this. Now, I don't think this should necessarily need to follow certain principles strictly, depending on the principles. But if you look at them kind of like objectivists, we believe in a strict adherence to reason. No exceptions, no compromises ever. This is why we, like the Catholics, or at least ARI, practice where they excommunicate. I mean, it sounds really harsh, but it's kind of like mathematics. Either the mathematical formulas work or they don't. And if they don't work and you carry on saying that they do, you're not a mathematician anymore.
Right.
And you get drummed out. It's the same thing with scientists that become pseudoscientists and other frauds, like the anti-vaccination guy, who basically was struck off he lost his medical license because he was promoting fraud. You have to have standards here. And so
that might be a reason why Islam is more virulent. They have less standards because any given imam,
Yes.
what he says goes, and if he issues a fatwa, that goes.
Yes.
And if with the Catholic Church, you have to have the Pope go crazy.
Yeah,
but there's one guy in charge. He has to go crazy in order for shit to go crazy. Or with the Mormon Church, they got their prophet. He would have to say some weird shit. But in Islam, any old guy in any old local church, whatever they are, can say, mosque can say weird shit, and it goes. So it's the decentralization that leads to chaos. So it's no wonder that the Catholic Church has things in that tight of reins. Otherwise, it wouldn't be such a long-standing and well-organized.
Well, until recently. I mean, the level of liberal disintegration in the Catholic Church has been quite astounding. I mean, it really has wrecked the Catholic Church in the last few decades. And because...
About the child molestation and all that stuff?
No. I'm talking about like the changes in theology, the changes in ceremonies, the changes in moral practices, like gay Catholic bishops and things like that. Now, because I'm torn, but it's a weird kind of thing, because on the one hand, I like the idea of them being integrated and being consistent to their principles, because then at least you can have a meaningful debate. You stick me with an Orthodox Catholic and we can immediately have a debate on the nature of doctrine, on the nature of transubstantiation, on the nature of the papacy and infallibility. We can talk about the core principles. You get me with a moderate and they'll just shrug and go, well, I'm not really sure about that kind of stuff. Yeah. About pretty much anything. And so I prefer coherent nonsense to incoherent nonsense, which is why I usually prefer the fundamentalists. And because the Catholic Church right now is losing a lot of its core values, its core practices. And the Orthodox are going out of their minds, because like only 5% of Catholics still want like the priest to face the altar and to have altar boys, not altar servers, which is a politically correct bi-gender equivalent of altar boys. So all these different changes, and their idea is that there is a logic to it. There's a reason why they do what they do. And it's interesting watching Catholicism, because you think to yourself, that's kind of like the way I think about my philosophy. In a weird sort of way, I relate to Orthodox religious people because they have a set of principles and they don't want to compromise, and they see everyone compromising. It's kind of like how I feel about libertarians, because we were dealing with that particular issue where they basically undermine and they undercut the metaphysics and epistemology in libertarianism, because a lot of libertarians get their ideas from objectivists. I mean, they ripped off Ayn Rand, but they took her economics and politics and not her metaphysics and epistemology.
Yeah.
Which means they undercut the foundation, and so they take the ideas and they just run with them in directions that don't make any sense. And the same is true of what's happening in Catholicism in a weird kind of parallel. They've undermined the catechisms, the theology, and the strict papal bulls and of the magisterium. So they're ignoring the findings of the congregation of the doctrine of the faith, which used to be called the Inquisition. So they're ignoring the strict adherence to these principles that do actually have an underlying logic, because the leading Catholics, the leaders of the catechists, are Aristotelian in a weird sort of way. And so there is a kind of underlying reason and logic and coherence to their pronunciations. But because this is what the Orthodox Catholics say, because the moderates are catechistically illiterate, they basically just ignore the underlying doctrines and reasoning behind it all, the theology. They basically just focus on ceremony and making sure it's all inclusive and politically correct, and they throw out the organ and replace it with an acoustic guitar, which when I first saw photographs of acoustic guitar sessions in a Catholic church, I nearly threw up. It's one of the lamest things I've ever seen.
It must be an American church, mustn't it?
I mean, I hate to think that goes on in the European Catholic Church. Because
I doubt.
And so I'm in this weird position where I find myself even though I disagree with them, because every time an Orthodox Catholic says, if you do not belong to the one and only church, you can only be saved through Christ, you can only be saved through the Catholic Church. The Apostolic Church is the only true church. And when they say stuff like that, when they say that anybody who isn't an Orthodox Catholic is going to hell, most people are going to hell because they're not Orthodox Catholics, that strikes me as sociopathic. I mean, why would you be okay with worshiping a God, being part of an organization that teaches that? Yeah. So what exactly is going on there where something is horrifically...
Now, there could be two types of organizations. There could be the ones that teach that, and there could be the ones that teach, oh, you can just follow anything, and ours is a nice option. Now, which one's going to gather up more people?
Yeah. I mean, which one's...
A function of, it is that way because it had to be that way in order for it to come about.
Yes. I mean, it's entirely self-serving. It makes sense as far as the survival of the church.
Religion is nothing but a bag of tricks that's evolved to perpetuate itself. That's all a religion is.
Oh, yes. But he can't understand the particular Orthodox Catholic I'm talking to or observing his lectures. He can't think of it in those terms. He can't acknowledge that the church has these doctrines because it's self-serving. He has to think of it in some other term. He has to think it's somehow right and just that most people are going to go to hell. I mean, it's such a disturbing concept. And as I say, it's not, not because I think it's true, but simply because it's a horrible idea to impose upon other people. I mean, even if you think it's real, I would still question God's morality. What kind of plan is this to set it up so that you've got all these different denominations of Christianity, let alone all these different religions, and if you're not in exactly the right one, you're going to hell. Yeah. Through dumb luck, really, because it's luck that you happen to be. And even then, he believes that all moderate Catholics are going to hell as well.
Right.
So this is very, very strange. But on the other hand, he's trying to be consistent and coherent to his theology. So he may be starting in the wrong place, but at least he's approaching it in the right manner, because the alternative is nihilism. Because people are basically saying, well, maybe hell doesn't exist, maybe nobody goes to hell, and sort of, and whenever they say stuff like that, people like him just point out scripture after scripture after scripture that completely contradicts that. And sort of I'm left with looking at Catholicism, when on the one hand you've got people who believe in nightmarish things, and on the other hand you have people who are all over the place, who don't believe in anything, who don't do anything. They just occasionally go to church because it's a social thing.
Religion is definitely coming apart at the seams, but I think that all of the problems in society that are coming up, transgender for one thing and Muslims in Europe for another, these are going to push people back towards religion. And Milo Yiannopoulos is religious and talks about Christianity, that he's Christian,
Andrew Clavin.
Guinness, and Louder with Crowder, they're all religious.
Yes. Well, this is what's happening with Pegida in Europe right now. Pegida is very pro-Christian. And this is the weird thing. On the one hand, I detest it, but on the other hand, I can understand, because at least it's a coherent worldview. At least it's an integrated world, because, again, to look at objectivism, we have the metaphysics, we have the epistemology, we have the ethics. It's all tightly bound. You can't take out one part and expect the whole thing to stay together. You have to have all of it. You have to have the ethics. The ethics logically follows from the metaphysics and the epistemology. And the politics and the economics logically follows from the ethics. So, for example, the politics, limited government constitutionalism, and the economics, capitalism, you have to be a capitalist if you want to be ethical. And you have to be ethical if you're going to acknowledge the metaphysical and epistemological facts of reality.
Yeah, everybody's selling freedom. The Marxists are selling freedom. So if you don't have an underlying philosophy, you have nothing better than what the Marxists have, because everybody's got freedom. So you got to have a little more in your game than just ethics and ethics and politics.
Yeah. So as to the politics of America, which is supposed to be what we start off with, of course, all I can say is that it's just become a perpetual ad hominem match, a tennis match, where they're basically just throwing Hillary Clinton's, because she has the WikiLeaks things coming out, because Assange is trying to time these to come out in a way that damages her campaign. But I think he's left it too late.
You know what I think we might be seeing is the orgasmic perfection of the old guard, of the old way. And I think that probably the next presidential election, or maybe the one after it, will be the new people who know they know what public debate is, and they know that, YouTube and Google is eternal and stuff. And this old guard that thinks that you say something in a newspaper and then that disappears and nobody remembers it. All the stuff you say and do goes on YouTube now, and it's a new.
It was so predictable, particularly with Trump, that they would dig up. You can tell that they, going in, the moment that Trump became the candidate, I thought, right, that's it. The Republicans have shot themselves in the foot, because there's going to be video of him from decades ago that the Democrats have been holding back, and that they are going to bring out at just the right point, which is exactly what they've done. Trump was a tarnished candidate, a doomed candidate from the beginning. There was no chance, because he's not, even though his plus side is that he's not part of the establishment, but the negative side is he doesn't know how to play the game.
Well, I'll tell you what, a lot of the women that voted for Obama don't care about Hillary. And a lot of the men who stayed at home in the last election are really trumped up. So
yeah. Well, this is the interesting thing. This is the issue that's been brought up. When you look at Brexit was a total surprise. People didn't see it coming. I saw it coming because I live in England and I actually have normal English friends. And unlike every liberal I've ever met, unlike every progressive I've ever met who live in a fantasy world, I actually interact with real people. Everybody from homeless people to working class people to unemployed working class people, all the way up to members of the British aristocracy. I have friends in every single level. And I knew Brexit was going to happen. It was inevitable from about 2 years ago. Now, but the point is that the left didn't see this coming at all. Total surprise. And one of the reasons why was because people were not reporting that they were going to go for Brexit. And the reason why is because, and we saw this before Brexit, and we saw this afterwards as well. The liberals love to smear and denigrate and mock anybody that disagrees with them to a tremendous degree. So if you say we're for Brexit, you're called a racist almost immediately. Immediately. And it doesn't matter what economic reasons or political reasons or principal reasons, it doesn't matter. You're called a racist immediately. And you're smeared and you're mocked and you're called a traitor. And so the sheer amount of poison and vile behavior that the left have been engaging in, the Remainers and the politically correct have been engaging in, the pro-EU traitors, the sheer amount of horrible treatment that Brexiters have received before the election meant that a lot of people were keeping it to themselves that they were going to go Brexit.
Right.
They were going to toe the Liberal PC line right until the voting booth, and then boom, they were going to show the true nature. That's what happened. At least 2 million Brits. That's exactly what they did. I didn't. I was openly Brexit from the beginning, but and afterwards, when the Brexit vote came out, the left turned on us even more. It became unbelievable, the amount of prejudice and bull that we had to put up with.
Yeah, bullying. Yeah.
Yeah.
The back in Soviet Russia, they used to carry little booklets around with dozens and dozens of insults that you could sling at people and names you could call them and stuff. So that's definitely the way that the left operates, and the right wants to get into an argument and prove your idea is wrong, and the left wants to censor you or
the best of the right anyway. Which is why the right have become the side of free speech, which is fascinating. But the question is, does that situation now apply to America? Are there huge numbers of Trump supporters who have to keep it secret because of the amount of shouting down and jeers and sneers they'll get from the left, been calling them sexist and racist, is homophobic, blah, 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 blah. The same terms that they use all the time, the basket of deplorables kind of dismissal. The sheer hatred the left have for people that disagree with them, they're the most intolerant bigots I have ever met. And so a lot of people are keeping this secret. And that's why Trump is popular, because he is a rejection of this prejudice that's been suffocating everybody, that the left are completely unaware that they are responsible for. The left don't know how suffocating and condemning and bigoted they are and how they come off as. And so they look at Trump and they can't make out why he's so popular. And so it might be the case that he's even more popular than it actually appears. But that's if the situation is the same.
I've been saying that to you. I've been saying that in these hangouts for months. These polls that show him at 37 and Clinton at 42% and this shit. I said, no way. There's no way that he's lower than Clinton. No way. So
that's the thing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm extrapolating from England. In England, I knew that was what was going on because I can judge the mood of the country. But the question is whether that also applies to America. I have no idea because I only know a handful of Americans.
Yeah, no, I've been saying for months that they're hiding it like that. That it's absurd that Hillary would outrank Trump and everybody you talk to says, yeah, we got to get Trump in there. We got to change things. Everybody you talk to says that. So, no, it's absurd. But
well, we'll see. I mean, I have no doubt that there are people keeping it secret. The question is, will it be enough?
Yeah, I hope so. Well, the question is, how much voting fraud can the Democrats pull off? I think.
I don't think they need it. I just think that there are still, because I mean, on my Google Plus account, I have liberals and progressives, and they are still going on about we need Hillary because she's a woman. We need Hillary because of climate change. We need Hillary to fight racism and sexism. So they're still in the PC identity politics fantasy world. They're not in the slightest bit interested in what's going on with Russia or about the corruption and the email scandals and the fact that the DNC rigged the whole thing to begin with. None of that means anything. None of the facts mean anything to them. They are happily ensconced in their ideological narrative. Yeah. And there are a lot of people like that. Americans are very susceptible to brainwashing. This is the country that gave us P.T. Barnum, after all.
Yeah, we are taxpayers, not philosophers. That's for sure. And our taxes go to pay for a huge army, but we ourselves, very few of us are involved in any of that stuff. So we trump around the world doing our thing. We've got to get Trump as president, just so we can say that we trump. When we're going to trump Russia. That's going to be great to trump Russia. So it's got to happen.
Well, the best way to deal with them is not to rise to Putin's provocations. Actually, getting chummy with Putin would be the best way to undermine it.
Yeah, that's true. And the thing about him is, I heard Trump say, you never insult a dictator, because then he's got to answer you. He's that kind of guy. Yeah. So you don't take it there. With a dictator, you don't take.
But I mean, but the problem is that Hillary and Obama and Kerry and the rest of them, they do exactly the opposite of the right thing every time. When they needed to show strength with Putin, they showed weakness with the whole reset button. When they needed to be tough with Iran, they caved in. When they needed to be tough with Assad, they caved in. When they needed to be tough with ISIS, they caved in. When they
now
needed
they have
to...
no options. Now Putin has his boot on their neck in Syria, and now they're talking tough.
Yeah, because I mean, now all of a sudden that they're in a panic because they've been in denial over this for such a long time. I mean, it'd be interesting if they eventually have the same realization about Islam. I've suddenly realized, oh my God, these people are actually horrible people.
It's coming. It's coming.
I don't know. I mean, they have too much of their narrative tied up with the whole victim hierarchy thing. They'd have to dismantle their own cultural Marxist victim hierarchy. I mean, it would be to knock Muslims off the top would be indescribable because they've defended them for so long and smeared. They've made enemies of every single leading intellectual critic of Islam on the planet, from Sam Harris to Bill Maher. Well, he's not an intellectual, but I don't know what exactly, a comedian, I guess. To Ayaan Hirsi Ali, to Bridget Gabriel, Robert Spencer, all the leading critics of Islam, they've demonized and denigrated for over a decade. There's no way they can go back now. They are completely stuck defending Islam no matter what.
If Islam keeps getting in more and more trouble, then the zeitgeist can change. I think the zeitgeist might change, and when it does, it's going to be ugly. So,
well, what I think might happen, which is what I hope will happen, is that a large number of liberals will switch to the right, or they'll go libertarian, because they won't be able to. Because eventually they've got to see that the politically correct mindset is poison. It's madness.
We already see that happening with like the Rubin Report and stuff. We already see the left go to the
but
right.
He's the beginning, but I just hope that he starts an avalanche.
Yeah.
So let's actually go back to the American politics thing again. Trump wants both candidates drug tested before the debate. And this is interesting because this goes back to the fact that it's all about personality now. It's not about issues and politics. It's about the state of Trump's mind and body and the state of Hillary Clinton's mind and body. Because a lot of people are saying that she went from could barely stand up to really bright and bubbly in the last couple of debates. And people are saying she's got to be on something. And the problem with that is that may be true, but it's conspiracy theory thinking. It's just this idea that the most paranoid belief is the one that should be given the most credence immediately.
Maybe she was on something and she stopped it temporarily. Maybe she's a heroin addict.
I mean, who knows? I mean, she's surrounded by people, and I don't just mean like Huma Abed and the rest of these corrupt freaks. I mean, the entire mainstream media is surrounded, protecting her and shielding her. So she could be on anything. But the problem is we're dealing with someone who is so corrupt that we don't know how corrupt she is.
Yeah.
Because the corruption covers the corruption, covers the corruption.
And all the Hillary supporters want business as usual.
Yeah. Well, it's so seedy because we have to rely on WikiLeaks to provide us with examples of her corruption to counter the propaganda being leveled at Trump.
We're blessed.
And WikiLeaks technically is stolen property. That's the problem.
We're blessed to have WikiLeaks. There were previous presidential elections where we remained in the dark till years afterwards.
Yeah, but the problem is that we're relying on a thief. We're relying on a criminal in a sense, and so we lose something of the moral high ground in the data that we have to use. I mean, that's the absurdity of it. And a lot of people and the media are able to just ignore most of the WikiLeaks. There's been some really interesting because it turns out in a lot of these WikiLeaks, they have incredible contempt for religious people because this brings up the whole religious orthodoxy thing again. The left hate religious orthodoxy.
The left is coming back around on religion. I have to say, in America, the NPR is running religious specials and stuff, and they're buddying up to religion. They're finding that Christianity is not so bad, that it's good for everybody, for everything. That's what they're saying. That's what's happening on the left. It's very scary.
But it's a kind of democratic Christianity, which is this phrase that they've started using. This was in one of the WikiLeaks. And so it's a kind of socialist Christianity. Because remember that social justice was originally a Catholic principle.
Right.
And
so
it's
a slight redundancy to say socialist Christianity.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, because I know some conservatives who have some very unsocialist interpretations of Christianity that do actually make a lot of sense.
And then you read the New Testament and it all falls apart, you know?
Well, parts of the New Testament. Some parts of the New Testament are theocratic, some are conservative. I mean, Paul's epistles are very conservative, and so it's really, you can cherry pick. But
Yeah.
the point is that the left, I think, want to muzzle Christianity, keep it in its place, but ultimately also hijack it. They're doing both at the same time because they've taken over a lot of the evangelicals and a lot of the Catholics that have become their own good little pets. But there's still enough resentment of evangelicals and Christianity because it represents an alternative point of view and authority to the state. Because ultimately, we're back to Stalin. If you want to know where the left, where Democrats, where liberals and progressives will go, if you give them absolute power, look what happens when one of their own gets absolute power. So look what happened with Stalin. He shut down all the churches, he persecuted the priests, he waged war on Christianity briefly, and then he changed it. But he waged war on it because it was a threat to his monopoly.
Yeah, from what I can see, the left today want atheists to go to church and to go do it for the social benefit and the socializing skills and blah blah blah. But they want them to not believe in the core tenets, but still go to church and still not smoke or drink or do whatever the religion calls for that way, but not really believe. I think that's what they want.
Yeah, because they cannot brook any alternative, because their ideology only works if you see the state as the only source of answers. Yeah. The moment you have any alternative, whether it's the free market, whether it's individuals, whether it's God, all these things are seen as threats, which is why they attack all of them. I've had a lot of debates. I was in a debate with these two, I don't know what they were, libertarians, socialists, whatever. I can't tell the difference sometimes. And I was trying to explain to them why free market principles work. They were giving this example that what if you have a large corporation that can lower prices to a ridiculous degree in order to beat other people because they can afford to run at a loss in one area because they're still making a profit in all the other areas temporarily. And then when they destroy all the competition, then they raise the prices. The problem is, I've looked into this. This is a myth. This doesn't actually happen in the free market, because if you lower the prices, you're making a loss on that area, and you have to justify that to the stockholders. And you have to say, well, we're beating the competition. The problem is that when the competition goes under, they sell their equipment to the next generation of up-and-comers who are able to then start up cheaper because they're using second-hand equipment, but new second-hand equipment a lot of the time. So then they're able to enter into the market and then charge at the lower price as soon as the big corporation raises the price again.
Yeah.
And so they have to constantly lower the price up and down, up and down, up and down, and wave after wave.
Or they can just buy the little company out.
Yeah.
But
the thing is, but the company can always say no.
But what if the company says yes, but then the guy takes the money and he goes and starts another one?
Yeah, that's the point. In a free market, you can't keep all the rivals down, and there's no point crippling yourself in one area, going deliberately, because remember, they're in it for profit, and so they can't continually run an area at a loss, and without basically having to answer for that. And so in the free market, you don't actually have this kind of undercutting and then sort of raising the price up, because the moment you raise the price, you create a market for alternatives.
You know, the Germans tried to break the first brine manufacturer in America. They were importing brine to America, and a guy started manufacturing it here, so they lowered their price way below his price. And you know what he did? He bought all their brine.
Yes, he bought the brine and then sold it back to, I can't remember who he sold it to. I think he sold it to China or something, and made a massive profit. Yes. Yeah,
exactly, yeah.
And this is, and I tried to explain this to them, and they would just absolutely wouldn't let me even finish explaining it. They just wouldn't let me actually get a word out. And so you're dealing with people here who just will not contemplate that the free market might actually work.
The reality is not a question for them, because they figure it out. They don't need reality.
Their love of theory is the root of all evil.
Yeah.
Which is, again, I'd like to sort of get back to that topic before we started recording. That I love the expression. I see that it applies to so much that people do. If you look at climate change, for example, that's a theory that people love, regardless of the evidence that disconfirms it, or at least disconfirms the policies that it justifies.
Well, it would be a love of false theories then, because I could love Darwinism.
Yeah.
And that lead me awry or amiss.
No, but in the sense, that's not a theory, that's a fact. It's. I think that the term needs to be understood as it's a theory, as in it's a completely abstract model that doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with reality.
Then it's the love of abstractions.
Yes, yes, but in a sense, yes, because this is the thing. The problem is the word theory has different uses and has different interpretations. But I do think that in essence, it's correct. At least, when I picture Stalin and Marx and Hitler, they all had their theories, their racial theories, their class theories, their economic theories, which they kept imposing on humanity regardless of the cost.
You're not describing theories then, you're describing subjective theories or incorrect theories.
Yes. I'm just trying to sum it up a lot briefer than that, though. Because on the one hand, I want to be precise, but on the other hand, I want to make sure it's nice and parsimonious.
Well, the love of incorrect theories is...
But the thing is, you might say that it's the love of the theory that makes you blind to the fact that it's incorrect. And even if it's correct, you shouldn't still have a bias towards it. You should still, after all, in science, you try to disprove your own theory. You can't...
Now, wait, why do I... Just because I love Darwinism doesn't mean I have a bias towards it. It just means I appreciate its beauty because I understand...
Well, you could say that a love towards a theory means you're not prepared to entertain evidence against it.
No. The love could come from having understood the evidence.
Yes, I agree. But in terms of the evidence, you love the evidence. You love the fact that the evidence supports it. But again, the idea of loving the theory in some sort of abstract sense that is immune to disconfirmation, that I think is what people are getting at.
Right. So with the theory of evolution, we could say it doesn't exist apart from the evidence for it.
Yes.
But
because it began with the evidence.
On the other side, you're talking about false theories that people love that cause trouble, like Marxism. There is no evidence for Marxism.
Yeah.
So that is a love of floating abstraction that has no reference in reality.
Yes. I mean, it's interesting to see it manifest in so many different ways because, again, the left want the people to see the state as the only solution. That's why they hate the family, because the family is independent from the state. That's why they hate savings. This is why the Keynesians are against savings, because, again, savings is financial independence from the state. This is why they hate religion, because religion represents a form of social and financial. Because remember, if you're part of a congregation and you have financial difficulties, you can receive help from other members of the congregation. There's a bigger family here, and it's independent from the state. So every single thing that represents any form of independence from the state, they attack. That's the consistent pattern behind everything that they do. Whenever they attack, it will somehow represent masculinity. Represents a physical and psychological state of independence. This is why the feminists are waging war on masculinity. This is why they want to turn every man into a crybaby beta male, because he's more likely to go to the state.
They want to demasculinize men, but they want to be masculine. Women are all about, a man comes to help them change a tire, and they say, "No, I've got this," and they change it them damn selves. Because why? Why do they want to become men? What is that all about? Why does feminism mean that women have to act like they have a penis? What is that all about?
Because they over-expand the concept of equality. To them, equality not only should apply in ways that it should, because equality should just mean equality under the law, negative rights. But they want to expand equality into economics because of socialism, but also the whole idea is that equality means being identical to something else. So if women are women are equal to men, that means they're identical to men, and so they have to be exactly the same. But they're not exactly being independent, though. Their kind of strength is a collectivist strength. It's a hierarchical strength. They're strong within feminism. They're strong within a hierarchy. They're strong, but they use authority. They're strong enough to use the government to force other people to do things. And so it's a kind of weird authoritarian strength. It's the strength of the SS guard. It's the strength of the bullet. It's the strength of the brown shirt. So it's not an independent strength. Masculinity is typically seen as an independent strength, the rugged individualism.
The brown shirts could at least show up on the street and fight if they needed to, if they were threatened. But what are the feminists going to do if they get into a fight or a war? Are the feminists going to show up on the
Well,
streets?
they call the police because, again, their thinking is authoritarian. The whole point with brown shirts is that they were about creating that authority themselves.
What if
Either-
Trump wins? Police are on Trump's side and they won't fight for the feminists?
Well, I hope so. But
What if
again,
the police are saying, "Bitch, go make me a sandwich"?
that would be hilarious. But the problem is that I actually want to see real women's lib here, but it's been lost by this feminism. Feminism destroyed women's lib.
Women's lib's fine. We had it. It was 100. It's
Yeah.
100 years old now.
Yeah.
We don't need
Yeah.
them to play football and stuff, for God's sakes.
No, and not unless they start getting good at it anyway. If they
Well-
start getting good at it, then I won't have a problem. But I don't like the idea of being forced to watch people do something that they're bad at because of affirmative action.
It's going to get.
Well, of course, look, South Africa is the single best reason why affirmative action is evil and disastrous, because their entire economy is destroyed as a result of affirmative action. Because the party in charge of South Africa is a Marxist party, believes in redistribution in every sense. But the main point is that they will take away the jobs of farmers, nuclear power plant workers, people from any walk of life in South Africa, if they're white, and replace them with someone who's black, regardless of whether or not they're qualified. And so this is why the economy in South Africa is just plummeted, because there's no meritocracy now. It's all affirmative action.
That has had very serious consequences in America as well. When we see a black person, for example, a black lawyer, a black doctor, someone in a very high position of authority, we do wonder to ourselves why they're there and whether it's because of merit. So they are.
Yeah, we shouldn't ever question that.
The law makes us question the very best people around us, the most motivated and intelligent people. Now, if there were no affirmative action laws, then you would have no problem. The guy had to have gotten there by merit.
Yeah,
But we disrespect our fellow men because of these laws.
Yeah, because this is what Booker T. Washington wanted. He wanted black people to achieve things through pure independent merit, so that there could be no question. The affirmative action is the very last thing that all the earliest black pioneers wanted. It's
Yeah.
the absolute betrayal. Same with minimum wage. All these stupid, brainwashed leftist black Americans campaigning for minimum wage, which was invented by white supremacists in order to price black people out of the market, and it has had exactly that effect. Because you've got a huge number of black people that are criminal, you've got a large number of black people that aren't sufficiently educated or illiterate, higher percentage than anybody else anyway. And they need lower rungs on the economic ladder. You need to accept reality and accept the fact that they need lower paying jobs than anybody else, so that they can work up the ladder through experience.
It's funny how that just blows hippies' noodles, that when you raise the wage, the first person to lose their job is the person who's not worth that wage. Therefore, you're hurting the poorest, the dumbest, the least skilled.
The only advantage that some of the more poorer people or disadvantaged people have in society is their economic wage price competitiveness. They can outprice anybody else. This is what immigrants do, and Mexican immigrants or whatever. They outprice everybody else. And they have a more competitive price that they're prepared to work for. That's a key market advantage they are entitled to. You're entitled to work for however low that you are prepared to say, and then you can build up experience, and that makes you worth more. That's how all economics is supposed to work. And no one on the left, because again, love of theory is the root of all evil, they basically just ignore how economic reality actually works.
Love of false theory is the root of all evil.
Yeah, we'll have to come up with some. I just like the snappiness of it as it is.
Yeah, it's not quite sufficient, because then I can't love Wolfram's theory. So
Yeah,
not sufficient.
Yeah.
But
so what else has been going on in American politics?
Oh, there was the thing where they stopped the oil pipelines up there from the tar sands, and they're mad about all that business. That would be hilarious if we stopped the oil sands from coming in, because it would cause another huge boom in fracking. So,
yeah, I mean, this is the problem. The economic consequences of people's actions aren't ever what the left think they're going to be, and I don't understand why they never bother to learn economics.
Yeah,
at all.
they may, it might be the upper people on the, people in the upper echelons running these things might be more crafty than we appreciate, but I doubt it. I doubt it. I bet it's just hippies.
Well, I mean, when it comes to what happened with the black community, because this was an issue I was going with the Democrats. The Democratic Party has a really sinister history of racism. It was a party of slavery, it was a party of segregation, it was a party of Jim Crow, it was the party of the Klan. And then all of a sudden they became the party of affirmative action and the party of subsidizing black families and everything else. And so the question is, did they suddenly see the light, or is this just another way of controlling black people? Are they aware of the detrimental effects that the policies have? I mean, they should be after decades of it.
I don't know. Are they that short-sighted? I don't know. It looks like they're that stupid and short-sighted.
Yeah. So this is a weird situation where I'm sort of the Democrats could actually be the most evil racist party in history, and just really really good at sort of spinning it. I find that idea fascinating, but I'd have to sort of look into the mindset of these people a lot more.
Or they're just incompetent power mongers.
Yeah. I do try to stick to the rule: assume incompetence over malevolence.
Yeah.
But it's just, it fits so well that they were, because they weren't incompetent when they were racist, they were malevolent. And then they went from malevolent in a way that hurt black people to incompetent in a way that hurt black people. I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, I think that the Occam's razor, the simplest explanation is that they're still malevolent and want to hurt black people.
It's all about getting votes, though. That's their goal. It isn't hurting the black people is just the path along the way. They're just a tool. Black people are just a tool for the Democrats. So
yeah, I mean, if you look at the WikiLeaks, a lot of the Hillary campaigners were attacking certain specific groups because they weren't a guaranteed voter bloc. And so the Catholics and the evangelicals, there are still a fair number of Catholics that vote Republican. There are still a fair number of evangelicals that vote Republican. And that's presumably why they're attacking those two groups. So they see people purely in terms of whether or not they're in the right voter bloc or the wrong voter bloc. They reduced everyone to a voter bloc, and that's the only thing. None of their policies make any sense in any other terms. So why are they still implementing policies, public school policies, or minimum wage policies, or other broader economic policies in black communities that have been responsible for sabotaging them? Well, it's whether or not they get a better voting bloc out of it. It doesn't matter how poor you are, because you still get to vote. If poor people couldn't vote, then that would solve the problem completely, because all this welfare stuff and social security stuff would disappear. Well, not necessarily the social security, depends on how it's done. But a lot of the democratic socialism vote buying wouldn't occur. Same with students as well.
That's an unstable solution, because then the upper classes would make laws that the poor people wouldn't have any say in, and the poor people would become very upset, and society would.
But they'd have more incentive to not be poor anymore, because they would no longer be handicapped by a welfare trap.
Well, that would be fine in a capitalist society, but in
well, that's the thing. I'm saying that if the whole thing worked, if you, well, I mean, obviously, I'd rather not take away the voting rights of the poor, because it's not their fault. But something has to be done to cut off the ability of the government to buy votes, the ability of the government to basically say that I'm going to take money.
Just cut off the ability of the government to do anything.
Yeah. But I'm thinking in terms of specifics. How do you argue against a specific policy that a lot of people think is a good thing, like giving money, taking money from one group and giving it to another group? You need to argue against the redistribution itself.
Well, according to Leonard Peikoff, you can argue details all day, but if a person can't understand principles, then you're never going to win.
Yeah, because I would argue on principle.
Yeah.
But the problem is the language barrier, because the left live in a different language world now.
No, that's not necessarily a problem. They live in that world because they're not willing to think. That's the real problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was debating a Marxist a couple of weeks ago, and he defined his Marxist system. He was a anarcho-Marxist or whatever. And when he described the system, everybody has the ability to freedom to choose whatever position they want, work to whatever degree they want, and people are covered outside of work by a voluntary system of preventing people from going to poverty. And the problem is that that's laissez-faire capitalism with charity. I mean, he was describing a system that is exactly what capitalism is. But because he literally redefined every single word in the English dictionary, he sort of convinced himself that he was a Marxist, but he was actually a capitalist. So it was a fascinating thing where they don't even know what position they've got. Because he didn't...
Marxism's a very confused lot, though, because they believe the withering away of the government and voluntary blah, blah, blah. So
yeah, even though their ideology would... Because they think it works. Socialism doesn't work, which means that you have to impose it through an authority. The only reason why you don't need an central authority on an economic policy is if it works. Because if it works, like capitalism does, you don't need a central authority because people will gravitate towards it naturally anyway. That's why capitalism works for freedom and socialism doesn't, because socialism doesn't work. And that's the problem here. You're never going to get them to accept that socialism doesn't work, because that's been the whole problem of the last 150 years. Endless socialist experiments that have all failed, and they will not accept the results of their idea because love of theory is the root of all evil.
Love of incorrect theory is the root of all evil.
Well, it's the thing. How do you know it's incorrect if you love it? Again, the idea is the love renders the theory non-falsifiable. Then you got the chicken and the egg problem. The love comes after you know the theory is true, not beforehand. Yeah, but I'm assuming that you love the theory before anything else has been done.
Well, that's because you love an incorrect theory.
Well, how do you know it's incorrect? That's the point. I mean, you have a theory, you don't know whether or not it's true, but you already love it. That, I think, is the point.
I'm saying that no evil comes from love of correct theories.
Yes. But the problem is that you can't ever know whether or not it's correct unless you've tried to debunk it yourself, because that's what they do in science. Scientists try to disprove their own theories. That's the best way of establishing the facts.
Now, that's just Karl Popper's nonsense. What you do is you prove your theory's correct. That's how you prove it's correct.
Well, I mean, you can logically, but in empiricism, it's often better to operate on the idea that it hasn't been disproved yet. I mean, because empiricism is a messy thing.
That's just Karl Popper talking Kantian nonsense. They verified with the transit of Venus, they verified E equals mc squared. That's not to say that they were trying to falsify it. They made a prediction, and the prediction was true. The falsified.
But they were open.
Falsified.
They were open.
A big boogeyman, a big Kantian boogeyman.
But they were open to the idea that it could be wrong. They were looking to see what the data was, if you see what I mean. There has to be some possibility that they could be false. There has to be some attempt, because that's what peer review is all about. Peer review is about trying to disprove it.
That's all a big cloud of stuff around it. There's two things happening. He made a prediction, and then he tested it. Yes. Now, all this stuff about falsifiability and stuff, that's all just Kantian nonsense.
I don't know. I mean, because I've seen the way that people define bad ideas so that they're non-falsifiable. So, well, also they can't be tested.
Yeah, that's what that means.
Yes.
That's all that means. So why do we have a new word for testing?
Yeah. Yeah, that's one way of looking at it, yeah.
It's not, it's Kantian nonsense.
Yeah. We could go into this in greater detail some other time. I don't think people will. Actually, somebody was saying that they wanted you to go back to doing educational stuff.
Yeah, I should. I've worked 70 hours a week the last few weeks. So
yeah. Well, actually, I explained to him that was the issue. That's why I wanted us to talk about the dim hypothesis somewhat.
Yeah, let's spend a few minutes on that. I actually only had an hour today, and we're about past that now. So.
Pity.
But what's the dim hypothesis angle you wanted to discuss about the Democrats and Republicans?
Yeah, I mean, because you were talking about someone was D2, because you'd throw out the word D2 as an insult. Is that when you're assertively disintegrating, when you're trying to disintegrate other people's ideas?
Yeah, a D1 is just sort of like, I don't think that would work. A D2 is like nothing ever works ever. So Yeah, someone who,
sabotaging other people's ideas as well.
yeah.
And so I'm looking for, because I'm trying to find other people that actively do that, but they seem to be quite rare.
Liran Shoham, did you ever run around him? He was in the early Hangouts. And
they often use aliases, so.
Yeah, he went by Mon Onum. Mon Onum.
Might have been.
Remember? But he showed up on Euron Brooks' show once in a while. And you can hear Euron Brook in one of his podcasts. He says, "Oh, Liran, will you give me a break?" And he says, "Here's one of my fellow countrymen here bothering me about something or other." So,
oh, yes. I know who you mean now. Yeah.
So
yes.
he's a D2. He's a classic D2, and he thinks that I'm a D2. So,
well, that's a very deconstructionist.
He's funny.
Yeah. Well, this because I'm trying to sort of look at how do worldviews as a whole fit with this. Are some worldviews more D, more M? Are some worldviews mixtures? Just some worldviews approach with an M mindset or a D mindset, depending on the strategies they're using with propaganda or different facets of their worldview. It seems to me that it's very difficult to sort of separate it all out into DIM.
Yeah, and well, one thing that Peikoff goes over in the dim hypothesis is how this is often a mixed bag with people and with philosophies, but particularly with people. And there'll be D in some areas and M in other areas. So all you're saying is that in some areas they have some idea that they care about, but not really in other areas. So that's really not a Stark phenomenon. The Stark phenomenon is the I person. They're the one that stands out from the crowd. They're totally different from the D and the M. Melt into a background of similarity when you look at them against the I person. So yeah, the D and the M are a mixed bag. D is a principle that most people aren't D in everything. If you were disintegrated about your meals every morning or about when you took showers, you can be a hippie who's disintegrated, but yet you take a shower every week or every 2 weeks, whatever hippies do, or whatever their time. So they're D, but yet they sleep, they eat. So, it can't be total. You can't be a total D. So it's a mixed bag. It's inherently a mixed bag. And the same with M people. Like a religious person, they're religious and they go to church and blah, blah, blah. And yet you see them at the picnic on Friday and they're drinking alcohol. So people are a mixed bag. So,
yeah. But they integrate to degrees as well. I mean, would you say that with integration it's 100% or nothing?
No, because you can find people that have little bits of integrity. And then, like you see them at work, upstanding, would never steal or anything. And then you go to their house and they haven't mowed the lawn all summer and they look like a total slob. But at work, they have a good work ethic and they look like an outstanding individual. At home, they look like they're homeless. So you can be, it's a mixed bag with people and with philosophies.
So it's about focusing on trying to be consistently integrated. You sit down at the beginning and say, I'm going to be 100% like this. That's what you should start off doing.
Well, being integrated doesn't mean it doesn't mean being integrated. It means following principles.
Yes.
But
it means being consistent about it. Yeah. Recognizing the difference and being consistent.
Consistent and rational. Not following an authority, not following your feelings, not following a hunch, not following a tradition.
Yeah.
But following your own judgment, following principles.
Yes. It's just that this is why I've been fascinated with the Orthodox Catholics, because they do believe in reason, they do believe in following a consistent principle, but the starting point is nonsensical. And so it's fascinating watching people who believe in the transubstantiation of the Eucharist arguing against irrational people on the basis that they're irrational, very deliberately. Again, this is why the Catholic in question was arguing against the Freemasons, because you can't say that all these religions are true. You can't say that every God exists or that every version of every God exists, because they're mutually exclusive. And it's not recognizing the mutual exclusivity of specific doctrines as the problem.
we've gone on a bit. The dim hypothesis, I'll just mention, I should have said earlier.
Yeah.
D is disintegrated, I is integrated, M is misintegrated. It's Peikoff's description of the three mental ways. He made a comment over here that we should maybe explain the terms to the audience, but
yeah,
um,
yeah. I'm testing his hypothesis to see how far it applies, and I'm trying to sort of, but it's very, very tangled up. So I'm just wondering to what extent it's useful, given that it takes a lot of effort to actually see the D and the I and the M and distinguish them.
well, you get better at it over time, I think. And when I label somebody, when I find out I can label somebody with something, then I watch after that to see how accurate it is. And sometimes it's hilariously accurate. And you can just predict what they're going to do when a given event happens or somebody says a given thing. You know what that person's going to do. So I experienced this not only here in the Hangouts, but in my personal life with an authoritarian guy. Anytime anybody said something, he was going to pop up and give somebody an order, even if it made no sense. And he was misintegrated around the idea that he was everybody's boss and dictator. So I think that it's hilarious to find out what people are, label them in your mind, and then see how much sense it makes, and how a disintegrated person, and you say, oh, this person's a D type. And sure enough, the next day they can't decide whether they're going to go to the picnic or to the shopping mall. And for 20 minutes they're back and forth. They don't know what they're going to do. And you're like, aha, I said he's a D type. He can't figure his shit out. So it's really useful. It is a way that people think. And I think it's very useful. And the more you use it, the more you see it, the more interesting it gets.
Yes. Well, this is why I've been studying people that are mixtures, because it's easy to find someone who is a full-on disintegrator, actively, aggressively, or misintegrated. But when they're a combination, I mean, when you find yourself listening to, as I say, the one example is, for people listening, Church Militant TV. That's one of the sources. Church Militant TV on YouTube, and it's fascinating the way that they argue on the basis of the left have abandoned reason. They've abandoned Aquinas. They've abandoned the intellectual tradition of the Catholic Church. And again, it's the parallels to the way that we talk, because you're abandoning Aristotle, you're abandoning John Locke, you're abandoning the Enlightenment, and that sort of thing. And it's fascinating seeing them as a kind of an equivalent, and yet something isn't quite connecting up in their worldview. But it's relatable. I sympathize with them, even though they're all like homophobic bigots and things like that. Well, one point I wanted to make was that I try to give the right the benefit of the doubt, even the religious right, when it comes to homophobia, because some of them genuinely they don't hate gays. But I was listening to Michael Savage, because somebody said, you got to listen to Michael Savage at least once. And I found myself agreeing with him right up to the point when he said something, one particular thing that really, really, really pissed me off a great deal. And that is that he basically said that gay people want to get married, not because they actually believe in the institution of marriage and they want to be happily married and be stable and all that. They want to mock the institution of marriage. And so they get married in order to mock it. Which, that idea, because imagine the mindset of that. You're basically saying that everyone who says they want to get married is lying, and that everyone has something out for the institution. And it's sort of a Christian victimhood, so that they exist in order to mock my beliefs, when most of them probably didn't even crap about his beliefs.
Yeah, only a religious person could hold that viewpoint.
Yeah, and because as I say, I was listening to his show, and I was listening to it for like an hour and a half, and then up until that point, I was sort of agreeing with him. And then when he said that one sentence, analyzed it from every possible point of view, and I could not find a way of seeing that wasn't bigoted, that wasn't in the mind of a bigot.
Yeah, and what about Bill Whittle? Is he atheist, or is he some sort of Christian nonsense?
I think he's probably agnostic. It's difficult to say, but with Christian sympathies.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the actual Michael Savage video. it's fascinating the way that he has a caller who's one of these bigoted leftists, and she says that you're a racist and you're this and you're that, and she doesn't have any examples of him being racist or anything else like that. But then, unfortunately, he gives us one in that homophobic thing. Because, as I say, it's interesting where I really try to give the religious right the benefit of the doubt. But as I say, they really are bigots, many of them. They really are. Because Pat Robertson on an episode of the 500 Club said about a year ago that gays go around with little rings with needles on them tipped with AIDS blood, going around giving people AIDS deliberately. That kind of mindset is evil and bigoted, and that's the problem here. I try to give the religious right benefit of the doubt, but my God, it's hard. No. Right. Because I find them so sympathetic in so many other areas, because religion is like dumbed down philosophy. They have principles, and they try to follow them. They believe in morality, and they believe in a coherent, or what they think is a coherent worldview. And compared to the nihilists that we often end up facing with, I find them far more palatable. But I just wish that they'd let go of their prejudices.
It's going to be a case of, there were people who were trying to decide whether they liked the Nazis or the communists more. And I don't think that's a good position to be in. And if you're trying to decide why you like religion and figure out good things about religion, then you're in a tight spot.
Yeah, well, it's not that difficult. A lot of the time, as I say, I agree with a lot of what they say a lot of the time, but then they just go over a cliff. It's like instant. It's like, whoa, what the hell? Where did that come from? Because they're trying to argue, they're trying to save morality. This is the tragedy of conservative Christians and Catholics and whatnot. They're trying to save morality. They are genuinely trying to do it because they understand that the left are trying to destroy it.
What we call morality, they're not trying to save that. They're trying to save something that some delusional tradition.
Yeah. So. But it does actually overlap with reason at times. Because if you look at Dennis Prager's videos, for example, some of the ways in which he explains human behavior and relationships does actually fit with reason. Because they've been around for a long time, the religious tradition, because the traditional point isn't 100% wrong, because many times those traditions are experience.
But if they bring back religion, they're not just going to bring back the good and nice parts.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to bring back bad parts, too.
Yeah. But which is worse, nihilism or tyranny?
I don't know. Are we going to have burnings again? Are they going to burn people at the stake for?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Have they learned the lesson on that one or not? And the issue is that what's the difference? At least if they're burning people at the stake, there are some people they're not burning at the stake, because ultimately where the left leads to is everyone's burnt at the stake. That's the question. Are we dealing with everyone's dead or some people are dead?
Right.
That's the bizarre problem we have here, because that's where nihilism leads to. With no morality, think of the way in which the left try to make every kind of degenerate behavior excusable. Any number of millions of excuses, deterministic excuses, prejudice excuses, and victim excuses, excuse, until you end up with no moral standards for any form of behavior at all, outside of the politically correct, which is really an amoral set of standards. And then when you look at the religious right, and they talk about virtue, they talk about self-control and dignity and independence, and they talk about the family, which, the level to which the family has been destroyed is quite astounding, because again, it represents independence from the state.
If society gets obsessed with that viewpoint again of the dignity and the morality and blah, 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 then they're going to tighten back down on the drug war. They're going to make it so you can't buy liquor on Sundays. They're going to make porn illegal. They're going to make...
Well, not if they emphasize conscience. Not if they emphasize personal conscience, because that's what John Locke did.
You think they're going to bring back morality without any of the authoritarianism, and I just think that's a daydream.
Well, the thing is, they did this once. What John Locke did is he basically took morality and he took it outside of the realm of authority and he made it about personal conscience. You may be doing the wrong thing, but it's up to you to correct yourself. That was what he was arguing. He decoupled Christianity from authority. That was one of the beautiful, genius things about John Locke, which is why I think Rand should have given him more credit. And if Christians and as I say, when you're talking to some of these Orthodox Christians, they know John Locke, they know Aquinas and all the rest of it. That's their mindset. They are quasi-Enlightenment thinkers. And if they can approach it that way, we might be okay with them. But it depends. I'd rather try to talk them off the ledge than the left off the ledge. I think that we stand a better chance of talking some sense into the religious right at this point than the left, because the left have overtaken them in terms of sheer insanity. So that's why, for example, I was talking to someone else in the Hangout a couple of days ago, and we were reminiscing about Catholicism because he was a former Catholic, and we were talking about pietas and the Holy Mother and all that kind of stuff, and about different. We were actually swapping, linking each other photographs of churches, different Catholic churches and stuff, and it was fascinating because we were talking about the artistic side and the cultural side, the historical side. So we were both, even though neither of us believed in it, we both found something about it that was sort of reassuring or comforting and that kind of stuff. And it was a weird sort of situation. But that's where I'm at right now. I'm trying to sort of drum up as much sympathy as and understanding and genuine open-mindedness regarding the religious right, so that I can talk them off that ledge. That's the point.
Well, I'm out of time. Time's up for me. So we'll talk more about why the religious right is not your friend.
I know.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.